be recording right now. Welcome everyone to Cal Poly Pomona's 17th Annual Cybersecurity and Awareness Fair. We would like to thank you, our sponsors, for supporting this event. I would like to give a warm welcome and introduce Dr. Richard Hayes, who will be presenting on the topic about intrusion detection. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed your time at our event thus far. As we go through this presentation, please feel free to post questions in the chat section. All questions will be answered during the Q&A portion at the very end. And without further ado, let's get started. I will now be sharing my screen. Okay.
We all good to go?
Yes, Dr. Hayes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate you and Cal Poly having me out today to brief on intrusion detection. My name is Dr. Rick Hayes. My doctorate is in cybersecurity. Graduated from Cap Tech University back east while I was in Maryland on active duty. Next slide, please. So just to tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover today, I'm with CISA. CISA is a part of DHS. We were established back in 2018, and my role is the cybersecurity advisor and cybersecurity coordinator to the state of Nevada. The reason why I'm speaking to you today here at Cal Poly is because California is part of Region 9, which I'm a part of, and there were some opportunities here, and I volunteered to do this, and I was asked to brief on intrusion detection today. So let's go through this agenda. We'll talk about the Cybersecurity Act of 2015, the Presidential Executive Order 14208 that came out back in May, who we are, who CISA is. We'll talk about intrusion detection, one of our great tools that we have, Einstein 1, 2, and 3 for intrusion detection and others as well. Configuration management, just going to cover some of the basics there about knowing your environment. Tuning, as far as tuning your tool goes for that intrusion detection. Some indicators of compromise, just some standard rules, and ultimately at the end, ransomware, just kind of round it back home. Next slide, slide 3, please. So back in 2015, the federal government came out with a Cybersecurity Enhancement Act, and in Title II of that, under the Federal Cybersecurity Enhancement portion, they talked about Homeland Security. Again, this is before CISA was established, although we're part of DHS. They came out and said, the presidential executive order said, hey, DHS, we want you to implement an intrusion assessment plan. And so the DHS had to come up with a plan. Back then we were the NKIC. They wanted to identify that we must deploy, operate, and maintain two key provisions. One was to detect cybersecurity risk in the network, and the other was to prevent or modify that traffic from doing bad stuff so that we could get it out of there and just remove that cybersecurity risk. Remember, again, risk equals threat times vulnerability. That's the formula, so keep that in mind. So regardless of the location that it was accessed from, it was essential in that act. If you can continue on, slide 4. There we go. In Title V portion of that same Cybersecurity Act of 2015 for the Federal Cybersecurity Enhancement, they talked about other cyber matters identified under the Executive Order 13636. And that's where we really started identifying what is the critical infrastructure. We have 16 sectors of which that we help in the private industry to help protect because it affects us all in the public. So that act was really huge for that. Moving forward into slide 5, we talk about the Presidential Executive Order 14208. This one just came out back in May, and the whole point of that order was to improve the ability and detect malicious cyber activity as it's happening out there in the world of critical sectors. So that executive order had some event log requirements so that agencies would improve an organization's ability to detect those intrusions. So if you're asking, why are we talking about intrusion detection? Why are we covering this today? It's right there in that next executive order. Ironically, that executive order came out within the same week that the Columbia pipeline attack happened, and I was living back in DC at the time, and what a mess for getting gasoline for your vehicles. Created quite the rush. Next slide. So who is CISA? Slide 6, and then on to slide 7. That's who we are. So we're the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I always joke and say we're so secure that we have the word security twice in our title. So that's what we're all about, is security, as you can see. Next slide, slide 8. So who we are. We have a mission and we have a vision. We want to maintain a safe, secure, resilient infrastructure so the American way of life can thrive. And our mission is we lead the national effort to protect and enhance the nation's physical and cybersecurity infrastructure. So we work together and we gather the best of cybersecurity infrastructure knowledge and practices. And then we share that knowledge to enable better risk management. And we help put processes into practice and then protect the nation's essential resources so that, again, we can support our mission and our vision. We provide unifying framework for national infrastructure protection that presents a common understanding of risk and enables the necessary collaboration among there's a lot of diverse stakeholders. Next slide, slide 9. So we're all about partnership. Everything we do hinges on the collaboration with the private sector. So some folks think, oh, well, you're CISA, you're working at a state level, so you're only concerned about the executive agency side of the state. No, we cover it all, both public and private. And so those partnerships we have to build, we want to be able to share critical information with you in advance before it becomes a problem so that you can build in those protections in advance and have them in place. And we can help you to identify where your weaknesses are and help you to shore them up and mitigate against those risks. Really, it's ultimately about, after partnership development, it's about risk management. Next slide, slide 10. Okay, yeah. So during the last fiscal year, we conducted more than 200 meetings with our critical infrastructure partners to share information, and we recommended preventative measures. So that's all about what I was just telling you. One of the keys to our efforts in national cybersecurity and communications at our NCIC, and Communications Integration Center, we focus on cyber elements of business, control and communication systems. So we really get to focusing on those and understanding that cyber and cybersecurity is really just a business, an arm of business, and it should support the business and keep that business operational. We don't want it stopping for anyone. So we oversee some automated indicator sharing initiatives, and those indicators are shared amongst the private and the public sector as attempted cyber hacks become apparent, especially with all the ransomware stuff that's happening. We share that. We've got a website out there, stopransomware.gov. It's really important, and we talk about other things as well on our CISA.gov website, where we share information about some of the latest types of attacks that are being launched that are right out there in the public. For instance, the black matter and dark side. That's the folks that are doing it, that did the Colonial Pipeline attack, for instance. So we have all that information cited out there, and we talk about preventative measures you can take to help protect yourself so that we can learn from the incidents that happen to other people. Next slide, number 11. So incident management and response is huge for us as well. We look at cyber threat response, and this is where our tool Einstein 3 comes into play, and I'll go into that here a little bit. But the beauty of that is that system, Einstein, helps provide a little bit of intrusion detection, prevention, data analytics, information sharing, and we cover a very large portion of the federal .gov environment. And if you're in a public sector where you're working for the government and you're not a .gov, that's something that we try to encourage and support you on so that we can help with those protective measures. We can take it even farther and help you to protect your information. One of the biggest things a lot of people will say is, well, I don't really want to share my environment with the federal government. Look, as we do assessments for you, not for us, but for you, the public, as we come in there and do those assessments, that information is protected. We cannot release it later. We cannot share it. We're punishable by federal law, and it cannot be requested in, say, a Freedom of Information Act request. So that's just something to kind of help put you at ease about sharing your environment and your information with the federal government, being CISA. Next slide, number 12. So here we are, we're talking about network defense. We have a national cybersecurity protection system. It's an intrusion detection and prevention system. It's called Einstein. And Einstein 1 provides awareness of intrusion threats. Einstein 2 provides near real-time intrusion detection. And Einstein 3 is for it accelerates and it provides real-time prevention of malicious cyber activity. That Einstein 3 is really a huge step up for us. And it, as you can see in the levels 1, 2, and 3, we've really grown with this. We've started the 24 CyberStat program assessments for various federal agencies to improve their information security as well. And it's growing. So next slide, number 13. And here's those 16 critical sectors that I was just talking to you about that we help protect. Look through it and see if there's a place where you are working or you know of that's in your community. These are public sectors. It might be a private business out there in the sector that you depend upon. You know, if it's water, if it's power, if it's emergency services, even transportation. I mean, it's all out there, and my lane especially is for information technology. But again, these are all businesses within these sectors that we work to help protect. And again, it's all about those voluntary partnerships, with a few exceptions that are directed. Here, next slide, number 14. Great, thank you. Appreciate your help, Ryan. The significance of critical infrastructure, and here we just talk about a little bit. They're disparate, really. There's 16 critical infrastructures. They're vast and they're interconnected ecosystems. You know, one of the things I talked about with the difference between technology and communications is, while let's say a company like AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, any of those who are offering a communication service in that sector, on the other side of technology is someone making the phones so that you can communicate in that communication sector. So you have to think about the cross-functionality of those sectors as well. And it's important that we recognize that as well as you do. And if you're working in one of those sectors, I'm certain that you already know that. Next slide, number 15. So here we talk a little bit more about the National Cybersecurity Protection System. It's an intrusion detection capability. It's via the Einstein 1 and 2, and it's passive. Okay, it's not active, it's passive. It's a signature-based sensor grid. It monitors network traffic for malicious activity. It enables the identification and malicious activity and traffic entering or exiting federal networks, and we can use this on your network as well. And again, it's signature-based intrusion detection, not technology. So that keeps it in that passive realm. Next slide, number 16. Okay, so first off, Einstein detects and blocks cyber attacks. So that intrusion detection. So it's not just, and this is as a collective. This isn't just Einstein 1, 2, or 3. It's the Einstein collectively. And then second, it provides CISA with situational awareness, and we can use that threat information, especially as we have those sensors out across your networks as well. And it helps the private sector protect itself. I mean, if you're not aware, and if you don't have a huge budget to pour into IT security, it's kind of cost beneficial for you to have this, for your company to have this service available to you that you're already paying for in your tax dollars. Einstein also advances CISA's responsibility under the Federal Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2015. You saw that earlier as we were talking about that. Slide 17, next slide. Okay. So one of the things that Einstein won, it came out back in 2003, and information technology, that's a long time ago already, for the as early as we are in the information age game. It looks at flow records, they're transactional records of metadata regarding network connections made to and from any agency's network or internet systems. And then as we collect that information, we share that, we do an analysis on it, and then we share it with other network security information folks. And we cover that on both the public and the private sector. Next slide, number 18. And I apologize, I'm kind of moving through these rather rapidly. One second, I just need to launch that. There we go. So Einstein 2, back in 2008, it's an intrusion detection system, and it alerts CISA to detected threats. Its signature might identify a known malicious domain or IP address that's associated with known malware activity, especially in the case of ransomware. And then we go slide 19. For Einstein 3, and this is where the game really super stepped up back in 2013, it's a intrusion prevention. So we moved from the passive to the active, from detective to preventative. And now here we are in intrusion prevention service with Einstein 3. And it's delivered through internet service providers as a managed security service. So think about who some of your internet service providers are that you get your service through. This might be something you want to ask them. Hey, are you guys teamed up with CISA in any way? Are we utilizing this Einstein tool? And if not, maybe it's time to bring it to your level for your network. It provides 3 critical countermeasures to protect federal, civilian, executive branch agencies. But again, this can work at your level as well. Next slide, 20. So let's talk about some of the features of it here. Email filtering, domain name server sinkholing, that's kind of essential. And web content filtering, that filtering piece is something that a lot of folks they take it for granted. Next slide. Okay, so we should be on slide 21. We are. It protects against most prevalent cyber threats. So again, think about that. Risk equals threat times vulnerability, and we're at the threat level here, not just the vulnerability level. It leverages commercial as well as government technologies, so we're keeping up everything we need to, especially in those .gov environments. And it meets the federal requirements of that Federal Information Security Management Act of 2014 and the Federal Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2015. Next slide, 22. It correlates cyber activity across the .gov enterprise, and it protects privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. So that's, again, a lot of people are worried about, well, I don't know that I want the federal government seeing my information. It's protected. It cannot be shared outside of what's inside of our circle, us and you. And whatever analysis that we do, it comes out as an analysis. The names are removed, the locations are removed. So it's just really, hey, here's the latest trends, and we share that kind of information with everyone else so that we can make more secure operating environments. So slide 23. I'm not seeing screen. Ryan, are you presenting?
Yes, Dr. Hayes. I'm currently at the configuration management slide.
Okay, perfect, great. My screen's showing black, so I don't know what you have there, but I've got another set of slides I'm working off of, so that's fine. So know the environment you're protecting. So now let's talk about that just for a minute. So your configuration management, when you think about this and you think about all those services, let's put that on a shelf for a minute. And we're talking back down to intrusion detection, talking about configuration management. How well do you know the environment that you're protecting? Do you understand the value of that information as you look at your boundary? Do you understand how far out those endpoints go? We're talking about mobile device management as well, right? And we're talking about points of inject where you have to identify this and say, wait a minute, when I'm thinking about intrusion detection, how do I know if somebody's entering our environment through one of our customers' mobile devices coming back in? Well, that's all part of understanding your boundary, because you have to look at those endpoints and see how far out does this go. You should have a map, the topology, that shows each and every single IP address so that those can be listed. And you'll be able to see exactly what's that hardware list of all the hardware equipment out there and what software are we running on all of those pieces of hardware. Because if someone's trying to get in and be a rogue actor and enter your environment, wouldn't you want to know if they're introducing something to your environment? And that's part of what those tools will help you to do. Part of intrusion detection, if you're not going to use one of the things that we just listed, having a tool that allows you to where you can scan the environment just to see what's out there. And typically, most folks do at the IT admin level. Slide 24. So is your intrusion detection tool properly tuned? Some automatically tune, some require manual, but you've got to validate this, you know. Usually it's a combination of both, because changes have to be made. Once you establish that baseline, where you're saying, okay, here's how our configuration management plan is going to work for all of our devices. And suddenly it's Patch Tuesday and you come out and you start patching stuff out in the field. You just change the configuration management of that. Is that going to set your tuning off on your intrusion detection tools where they start firing off, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, right? And you're having this incident. No, we made some changes over here. So we have to, on our configuration for that device, patching it, maybe we need to come back over here and retune our detection tool, whatever intrusion detection tool you happen to be using. Slide 25. So indicators of compromise, IOCs, you've got to know your environment's heuristics. How does it behave? When does it do what it's supposed to do? Who all uses it? You know, you see this big spike going on your boundary, and you're looking at it and you're saying, why is this thing spiking? Oh, well, it's the end of the month. We're running reports. We're finance is updating stuff. Oh, it's a week before payday, and finance is getting everyone's time cards together, right? So those are just some basics, but you've got to understand, how does our environment behave? When do we have peaks? When do we have drops? So that you can recognize some of those anomalies as they're happening. And there's other unusual types of network traffic that you will start to see as you start tuning that and getting familiar with it. And there's known rogue IP addresses that are going to pop up when you see them. There's a list of them. CISA maintains them as well. So does the FBI, so does US CERT. And those rogue IP addresses, when they start showing up on your network, that lets you know, hey, there's somebody here that doesn't belong here. So you can start investigating that. Suspicious registry or system file changes. You know, when you get a reg edit that happens and it changes something, that's something to be aware of, something to validate, right? Validate. Don't just look at it and go, oh, okay, there's something going on. Validate. What is it? You got to know those behaviors. Virus signatures, those get changed as they get updated. Unusual DNS request, you'll start seeing somebody requesting something and of your domain name server, and you're like, why is this happening? Start digging into it. There's MD5 hashes for malware, and you can see what those are. Again, that information shared a lot of times on those alert sites. CISA has them, FBI has them, and we share all that information. And no malicious URLs or domain name uses, and that came out of Lifers. Next slide, 26. So how do I respond to a ransomware infection? So we help with that as well. We do the will analyze that malware for you. If you come send us the information so that we can start working with you. You can send us a sample via an email in a password protected file, or you can upload the sample directly, either way. And then we have some ransomware guides. I've got a link on here. You can see it there, it's PDF. And yes, that's a safe link, you can click it. Next slide, 27. That's the ransomware guide. It's just a cover, and again, the link so that you have that. And next slide, 28. So real quick, I want to talk to you about ransomware. I don't know if you're aware of this. So DarkSide, now Black Matter, DarkSide back in May, when they did that attack on the Columbia pipeline, one of the ways they did it was through the ransomware was they launched it via phishing attempt, right? And we can't validate this, but that executive order I was talking to you about a moment ago, the Presidential Executive Order 14208 came out back in May, like I said, within a week of the Columbia pipeline attack. It's kind of ironic, the timing. One of the things that it calls out for is multi-factor authentication. Think about your organization. When you're accessing an information system that belongs to your organization, is there a multi-factor authentication, or is it just a standard single, you know, to where it's a user ID and password? That's just not good. Now there's a presidential executive order saying, no, you got to change, make it multi-factor so that this gets protected, especially if you're in one of those 16 critical sectors. So back to the dark site, one of the things that happened that changed the whole game for us was ransomware as a service. When that attack went down on the Columbia Pipeline Company, they launched this whole attack. It was somebody else went on the dark side and they said, hey, look, they're hosting this ransomware as a service. You can come out here and you don't even have to have the skills to go and launch attack. You just have to know where the reward is, where the money is on this environment. So they started hosting that and it was working for them. In fact, now they've got phishing as a service. And so these as a service things are going to continue to grow. And that was a real major game changer. And you've seen a major spike in ransomware since May as an effect of that. So yeah, that was one of the key pieces. But when it comes to ransomware, I don't want to belabor that point anymore. When it comes to ransomware, we have a guide. We can help you with that because I literally just came off of another call where I was working on a tabletop exercise with them dealing with a ransomware type event. So it's very relevant, very time sensitive. Next slide, 29. And there you can see my list of references. So if you'd like to go look them up for yourself or do a little further research. And then finally, slide 30 is my last slide. And there's my contact information and other folks that I work with. And now I am ready to receive questions. So Ryan, if you want to open up the mics to them, or I haven't seen anything come across in chat yet. So I'm just waiting for the audio portion.
Okay, give me a second. Let's see.
Just so you know, chat looks like it's disabled.
Oh, thank you. That's why I can't see it.
Yes, so we have a question from Elon Ramirez. He's asking, what background/education do you look for in new hires?
Well, Elon, it depends on which role you're going for, right? Funny you say that. I worked for a year with CISA doing cyber recruiting, and typically I'm looking for, and we are as well, because I've worked with one of our recruiters here at CISA when I was back there as well. And one of the key things we're looking at is, you know, is it somebody that wants to develop in cyber? In cyber, you can't just do the job. You have to have a natural curiosity. You know, critical thinking skills is something that we look for. If you're farther along in the game and you're going to college or university, you're working on a cyber computer science degree, or if you're working on a certification, you know, it's showing a real interest because you're putting your time into increasing your awareness level as to what does cybersecurity mean. So those are some of the basics that we really look for. Typically, definitely an attitude and an aptitude to learn, because that's something that will continue in this career field. I've been doing it since 1998, and I was in communications even before that, before cyber really became a thing. And I tell you, it's been a continually learning environment. So that ability to have critical thinking skills and to look at things objectively and get out of the way of it, and be wanting to learn. Boy, those are two big ones, as well as a good work ethic. Did I answer your question? I can't see the text. Brian, help me out. I'm driving in the dark here.
Yes. Elon responded by saying yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And so,
any more questions?
one of the audience members would like to share your contact information. If would that be okay, Dr. Hayes?
Yes, please. I would be more than honored. Because that's what we're all about at CISA. We're all about partnerships and development. So yeah, love that.
It was the last slide, this one, right? Oh, here's Dr. Hayes' contact information for anyone who's interested. And so I believe we have more questions on the chat. I will now be going to stop sharing my screen. So let's see. And so another question is from Kevin Garcia. He's asking, how important is it for those who work at CISA to limit their digital footprint, things such as social media accounts and photo posted online?
Well, it all depends on what your role is. Again, are you working in an offensive or defensive position? Are you, like for instance, for mine, I like people to know that I'm with CISA because we're about building partnerships, right? And so on the front side of the face, I go in and help people do assessments. You know, if you're somebody that's working, and mine is the defensive role, right? If you're somebody that's working on the offensive role, you probably want to keep a very limited, if any, social media footprint. When I was working before in the military, we talked about that as part of anti-terrorism, both foreign and domestic. Working with NSA and Joint Force Headquarters Godin when I was there, same sort of thing, because the sensitivity of the role, because you're a target and you have access to classified information. So, and that's a real game changer. When you start getting access to classified information, you got to start thinking about, who do I have relationships with? How visible am I? What kind of information am I sharing about myself? So again, it depends upon your role and what you have access to.
Does that answer your question, Kevin? Okay. And Kevin says that makes a lot of sense. If you're on the offensive role, you don't want to target to gain any intel on you. And he says, thank you, Dr. Hayes.
My honor, thank you.
I have a little bit of a question, if you don't mind. I've been attending some of the CISA webinars that you guys been offering. They're fantastic, by the way. I recently attended one where we were talking about the Tulsa ransomware attack that went against the 911 operations center. And I'm really interested in learning more about the details of what happened, just so that I can, well, for obvious reasons. And I was wondering if those are published anywhere, especially for ransomware events that hit the public sector. And then as a follow up on that, there's also the ransomware and the cyber events that happen in the private sector, which I know that the president and other members of the in the federal government are pushing to make that more transparency more possible. So maybe we could talk a little bit about making that information available and what that's going to take to happen and what we currently have.
So those are both great points. Yes, we do share that information. On our CISA.gov website, we share that information as it gets to a point where we're far enough through an investigation, because remember, we're sharing information. So it might be the FBI that's right in the middle of an active investigation and can't share that information yet. But as soon as they get to a point to where they can, we do make that public. And part of that is from that Presidential Executive Order 14208, where it talks about that transparency and us being able to share that information as these attacks happen on private industries. But when it comes to sharing, we're not sharing the who got attacked. We're not, well, in some cases we are, but that's just, it's public information at that point anyway. We're really more about sharing the, hey, an attack happened, here's the method that they used, here's the indicators of compromise, here's the patch to fix that problem so you're not vulnerable to it. Or it might be something that's a matter of configuration management. And when we come in and do those assessments, like I was talking about, we can help to identify those areas where those vulnerabilities exist based on the known threats that are happening currently with ransomware. So yeah, and CISA.gov is our website where you can go in and find that information, and we make that releasable just as soon as we can so that we do get that transparency, because it's not just about protecting whoever it is that we have a partnership with, but also protecting the rest of the public and private sectors so that they have awareness on the latest threat trends. There's briefings that you can sign up for based on what your role is and who you're with. As you enter into those agreements, you get into a position to where you can share on that intel information as it's coming out so that you understand it. That has to be protected, but it's all about what your role is and who you're with based on how far in advance we can share that information, because ultimately it all comes out. But there's a time period due to investigations that are happening currently by FBI or others. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And CISA is going to be the central point of contact for the country on all of that as private industry starts adopting this. I know there's a lot of nervousness in the C-suites in terms of that data sharing. It's going to take a lot of persuasion on your side to get people to realize that sharing is a good thing. And just as a defender, as a blue teamer myself, I believe that the attackers, the ransomwares, the malware people, they're really successfully utilizing a divide and conquer on us as a nation. So we have to get unify the nation and the private industry and the public sector together to have a chance against these guys, these criminals.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's they win through our ignorance, but when we start sharing that information, we remove that ignorance as to what's happening, how it's happening, when and where it's happening, who's getting targeted. As we start to share that kind of information, that helps us to come together and unite. And there's strength in numbers and strength in knowledge. Knowledge is power. So sharing what we've collected and consolidated and come up with ways, working with private industry as well, to combat that is really the major game changer, and that's part of the establishment of CISA and why we were brought into play back in 2018. So thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, and so Dr. Hayes, we have another question from Andrew, and he's asking, do you agree with former Pentagon official Nicholas Childen's comment that was made public recently that US cybersecurity is at kindergarten level compared to China?
Well, I really can't comment on that because I'm not with Pentagon, and I'm not at that level. You know, do we have a lot to learn? Do we have a lot of growth that we need to ensure happens in our capabilities? Yeah, definitely. And that's about developing people. CISA's working up a K through 12 program right now so that we can start developing and changing the awareness and the attitude of everyone from kindergartners all the way through 12th grade, as well as these partnership programs that we're doing with businesses so that they understand the threat. It's a matter of awareness that we're trying to make grow. And that will always happen because we're such a rich and diverse country. Of course, people are going to want to attack us. And it doesn't really matter who the threat actor is, if they're foreign or domestic. We will always have growth that we need to do through partnerships and development, because as technology and policy evolves, you know, the threat landscape continues to change, and the vulnerability landscape also continues to change. And really one of the key factors that I found is that it's in the development of those people in those key roles so that they can do a better job and raise their awareness level and their skills at the same time. But as far as that other comment goes, I really can't comment on that. I'm not in a position to, but I hope I answered the question otherwise.
Okay, and another question from Brandon, and he's asking, can you speak more about the security clearance requirements for entry-level positions, specific security auditing?
Position-specific security audit? Is he talking like a security control? Say that again?
So he's asking for, can you speak more about the security clearance requirements for entry-level positions, specific security auditing? Is his question.
Specific security auditing. Is he talking about a role as a security control assessor or auditor?
Yes, he says.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if it's an entry-level position, there's always the basics. You know, they're going to do a local area check on you, a national agency check on you, and then, you know, they'll dig into it. Depends upon the level of entry level. Again, offense or defense. Usually it's at the secret level that you're going for a clearance at on average. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be accessing that kind of information right away. And there's standard things. Some things are waivable, some things are not. I want to make sure that I give you the right info on that. And I don't have the exact answer for entry level, but typically, you know, if there's misdemeanors on your record, I believe, and don't quote me on this, I'm not certain. I believe that that might be something that's acceptable based on the role. But again, entry level, it might just be a simple public trust security clearance level that you need. So it's based on whatever that role is. And if you're interested in it, talk to whoever the hiring official is for the position that you're interested in, and ask to talk to the security manager because you are concerned about it, or you just want to know what those requirements are, and they can fill you in a little bit better on the entry-level roles, because we're vast and we're growing. So not every role is going to require that higher level. Some of those CSAs that you're talking about could just be doing simple assessment of security controls on I don't know, something that's not a real critical target, right, in that critical sector. Another one could be, and so that's obviously going to deem a higher clearance based on the value of the information and the value of the asset that has to be protected. For instance, if it's something that's dealing with the Department of Defense or Department of Energy, so on, they might warrant a little higher. They might not. It all depends on the sector. So the best thing to do is to talk to whoever the hiring and selecting official is that's listed on the job announcement you're interested in. They can fill you in better on the details for that particular role. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Brennan said, thank you for that. Very interesting, he says.
Great, great.
And Dr. Hayes, I do have a question. So during your presentation, I've noticed that there's a 5-year gap between the 3 Einstein iterations. And so I wanted to know if CISA had initially planned on deploying a 4th Einstein iteration back in 2018, or is that currently in development?
I'm certain that it's continually in a state of evolution because, you know, things change. Again, technology and the policies evolve. So obviously the capabilities of any tool is going to have to evolve because you're just going to see the threat landscape change and the vulnerabilities change. So I'm certain that they're working that, but I really can't comment on it otherwise. But logically, I would think so, just as any other automated information tool.
Right, thank you. And another question of mine is, does CISA have any changes planned for the next few years?
Changes planned in what regard?
Just in intrusion detection, or perhaps in cybersecurity in general.
Oh, definitely. You know, again, just like our tool Einstein, we're continually growing and evolving, and like we were just talking about the partnerships a moment ago. As those partnerships develop, you know, we might see other capabilities. As the threat landscape develops, we might see other capabilities that we have to develop. For instance, when ransomware as a service became a thing from the folks over at DarkSide on the bad side, when that happened, that's a major game changer. So anytime you get something like that, where the threat landscape changes, then we have to change in kind. And, you know, we're always on the look, and that's why we're trying to consolidate all this metadata and take a look at it. And our analysts are looking at it saying, how's that threat landscape changing? What more do we need to do so that we can try to get ahead of the attacks when they start coming, so that we can share that information with everyone else and help them to get protected so they don't become a victim of whatever the threat action happens to be. So we look for those kinds of indicators of compromise that are out there, and we say, oh, okay, this is the normal way that they're doing stuff. And then we share that back with everybody else, those heuristics that we see as threat actors are doing things in the cyber kill chain. When you look at it and they start mapping out a network, okay, that's a big key indicator that they're planning some kind of an attack on that particular target. And then our hunt team will find that information and share that individually with whoever's being victimized, usually before they know they're even being victimized.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Hayes. It appears that we no longer have any questions. And so,
Great.
Right. And so it appears we've answered all the questions. And so thank you so much, Dr. Hayes, for being our guest today. Your presentation was very insightful. I also wanted to thank everyone for attending Dr. Hayes' CISA's Intrusion Detection session today. We hope you learned a lot from this session, and we appreciate your engagement. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us, and we will be happy to help you find the answer. Please do not forget to check out our water bottle and laptop stickers contest, as we are giving away No Starch Press $20 ebook voucher. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes.